The glass building looked like it touched the sky. Rachel stood outside staring up at it, her heart beating so fast she thought it might jump out of her chest. She was only 23, but these past few months had aged her in ways that didn't show on her face. In her sweaty hands, she clutched an old envelope. Inside were papers that could change everything or ruin everything. She wasn't sure which. 6 months ago, Rachel's life was different. Well, not good, but different. She worked at a diner in the mornings, cleaned offices at night, and did weekend shifts at a grocery store. Every penny went to one thing: her mom's medical bills. Cancer doesn't care if you're rich or poor, and the treatment costs were drowning them both. They lived in a tiny apartment where the heater barely worked and the neighbors fought so loud Rachel couldn't sleep most nights. Then a lawyer showed up at the diner one day. He was wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place among the cracked vinyl booths. He said he had a proposition for her. A wealthy couple needed a surrogate. They would pay her enough money to cover her mom's treatment and then some. All she had to do was carry their baby for 9 months. The lawyer made it sound simple, almost easy. Rachel remembered sitting in that booth, stirring her cold coffee, thinking about her mom's tired face and the latest hospital bill that made her want to cry. She said yes. What choice did she have? The lawyer arranged everything quickly. Medical appointments, procedures, paperwork. She signed documents she barely understood. The lawyer said the couple wanted privacy, so she never met them. Never even knew their names. Just received payments through the lawyer and went to doctors who treated her like a walking incubator. Now, 3 months pregnant, everything had fallen apart. 2 weeks ago, the lawyer called her. His voice was different, nervous. He told her that Mrs. Chen, the woman who hired her, had died in a car accident. Just like that. Dead. And then the lawyer said something about complications and legal issues, and he would be in touch. He never called back. When Rachel tried to reach him, his number was disconnected. His office was empty. He had vanished, taking most of her money with him. Rachel had spent the last 2 weeks in panic. She had a baby growing inside her, a baby that belonged to a dead woman and a man she'd never met. She had no money coming in anymore. Her mom needed another round of treatment next month. The rent was due, and she had no idea what to do. So she did the only thing she could think of. She found out where the couple lived, who they were. The husband was Alexander Chen, the CEO of Chen Industries, a billionaire. The kind of man who lived in a different world than her. Standing outside his building now, Rachel felt like an idiot. What was she going to do, just walk in and tell him his dead wife hired her to have their baby? He probably didn't even know. Maybe he would think she was lying, trying to scam him. Maybe he would call security and have her arrested. Her hand moved to her stomach, which was just starting to show. She thought about the tiny life inside her, innocent in all this mess. She took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and gold, with security guards who looked at her like she was dirt on their fancy floor. She could see herself reflected in the polished surfaces, cheap jacket, worn shoes, hair that needed washing. She didn't belong here, but she walked to the reception desk anyway. The woman at the desk looked up with a fake smile that disappeared when she saw Rachel. "Can I help you?" she asked in a tone that meant she didn't want to help at all. "I need to see Mr. Chen," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "Alexander Chen, it's important. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's about his wife, Mrs. Chen. I really need to see him." The receptionist's face changed, got colder. "Mr. Chen is not taking visitors. If you have a business inquiry, you can email his office." Rachel felt tears starting to burn in her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being poor, tired of being treated like she didn't matter. "Please," she said. "Please, I'm not trying to cause trouble. His wife hired me before she died, and I just need 5 minutes to explain." That's when security showed up. 2 big guys in uniforms walking toward her like she was dangerous. The receptionist must have pressed some button under her desk. Rachel's whole body started shaking. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. She turned to leave, clutching her envelope, when a voice stopped everyone. "Wait." A woman in her 50s, dressed in a perfect gray suit, walked across the lobby. She had kind eyes, and she was looking at Rachel like she actually saw her. Really saw her. "I'm Mrs. Park," she said. "I'm Mr. Chen's assistant." "What's your name?" "Rachel." "Rachel Torres." "And you said something about Mrs. Chen?" Rachel nodded, unable to speak. Mrs. Park looked at the envelope in Rachel's hands, then at Rachel's face, which must have shown everything she was feeling. "Come with me," Mrs. Park said. The security guards looked confused. The receptionist looked annoyed. But Mrs. Park had already turned toward the elevators, and Rachel followed her like a lifeline. They rode up in silence, 47 floors. Rachel's ears popped. She'd never been this high up in a building before. The office they entered was bigger than Rachel's entire apartment. Windows everywhere showing the whole city spread out below. And behind a massive desk sat a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Alexander Chen was younger than Rachel expected, maybe mid-30s. His suit probably cost more than she made in a year. But his eyes were red, and his desk was covered in papers and coffee cups like he'd been living there. He looked up when they entered, annoyed. "Mrs. Park," I said, no interruptions. "I think you need to hear this, sir." Mrs. Park gestured to Rachel. "Go ahead." Rachel's mouth went dry. This was it. She stepped forward, her legs feeling like they might give out. Alexander Chen looked at her like she was a puzzle he didn't want to solve. She opened her mouth and the words came out in a rush. "Hi, sir. Your wife hired me as a surrogate before she died." The silence that followed was so heavy Rachel thought she might collapse under it. Alexander Chen went completely still. His face drained of color. He stood up slowly, staring at her like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What did you say?" His voice was barely a whisper. Rachel held out the envelope with shaking hands. "I'm 3 months pregnant. The baby is yours and your wife's. She arranged everything 6 months ago. I never met her, but the lawyer showed me the contracts and the medical records. Then she died and the lawyer disappeared and I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to just show up like this, but you need to know." Alexander Chen took the envelope. His hands were shaking too. He opened it, pulled out the papers, and Rachel watched his whole world change right there in front of her. In his eyes she saw shock, grief, and something else. Something that looked like the tiniest spark of hope in the middle of all that pain. Alexander Chen sat down heavily in his chair, still holding the papers Rachel had given him. He didn't say anything for what felt like forever. Rachel stood there, not knowing if she should leave or stay or explain more. Mrs. Park put a gentle hand on her shoulder, the first kind touch she'd had in weeks. Finally, Alexander looked up. His eyes were wet. "How do I know this is real?" His voice wasn't angry, just broken. "How do I know you're not lying to get money from me?" Rachel had expected this question, but it still hurt. "I have medical records, emails from the lawyer, bank statements showing the payments I received. And we can do a DNA test. The baby is from your embryo and your wife's. The doctors can prove it." Alexander pressed a button on his phone. "Get me David and the legal team, now. I don't care what meeting they're in." He looked at Rachel again, really looked at her this time. "Sit down. You look like you're about to fall over." Rachel sat in the chair across from his desk. It was the most comfortable chair she'd ever been in. She felt out of place in this expensive office with its fancy furniture and city views. Alexander was already on his phone, making calls, his voice sharp and commanding. This was a man used to fixing problems, to making things happen. Rachel wondered if he saw her as just another problem to solve. Within an hour, the office was full of people in expensive suits. Lawyers with briefcases. A private investigator. They asked Rachel a million questions. Where did she meet the lawyer? What clinic did she go to? Did she have copies of everything? Rachel answered as best as she could, showing them every scrap of paper she'd kept, every email she'd saved. One lawyer made phone calls while another typed rapidly on a laptop. Alexander watched it all from his desk, his face unreadable. Rachel couldn't tell if he believed her or hated her or what. The investigation took hours. Rachel's stomach growled loudly in the quiet office. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, couldn't afford to buy lunch. Mrs. Park heard it and quietly brought her a sandwich and water. Rachel wanted to cry at even this small kindness. Finally, the head lawyer, a serious man named David, spoke. "The clinic confirms they did have a patient named Isabel Chen, who arranged for a surrogate 6 months ago. The medical records match. The embryo transfer date matches. The lawyer who handled it, Gregory Walsh, was legitimate at the time, but his license was suspended 3 weeks ago for mishandling client funds. He's currently wanted by authorities." David looked at Alexander. "I'm sorry, sir. It appears your wife did arrange this without telling you." Alexander's face crumpled. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to everyone. His shoulders shook. Rachel realized he was crying. The lawyers looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. Mrs. Park quietly ushered them out of the office, leaving only Rachel and Alexander. She knew, Alexander said finally, his voice thick. She knew how much I wanted a child. We tried for 8 years. 8 years of treatments and disappointments and watching her body go through hell. After the last failed attempt, I told her we should stop, that I couldn't watch her suffer anymore, that we could adopt or just be happy together. He turned around and Rachel saw tears streaming down his face. She said, okay. She smiled and said we'd be fine. I thought she agreed with me. I didn't know she went behind my back and did this. Rachel didn't know what to say. Maybe she wanted to give you a gift. A gift? Alexander laughed bitterly. She gave me a child I'll raise alone. She gave me guilt I'll carry forever. She's gone and now there's this baby and I don't even know how to feel. I can leave, Rachel said quietly. I can have the baby somewhere else and just give you custody when it's born. You don't have to deal with me or see me or anything. I'll sign whatever you want. Alexander stared at her. Where would you go? I don't know. Home, I guess. Where's home? Rachel looked at her hands. An apartment in South End. It's not much, but it's what I can afford. And your job? What do you do? I worked 3 jobs before. I'll figure something out. You're pregnant. With my child. And you're going to work 3 jobs? Alexander shook his head. No, that's not happening. I don't need your charity, Rachel said, defensive now. She'd grown up poor, but she'd always worked hard, always taken care of herself and her mom. She wasn't a charity case. This isn't charity. This is responsibility. Alexander sat back down at his desk. My wife hired you to carry our baby. She made you promises and you held up your end. The lawyer stole from you. None of this is your fault and I'm not going to let you or my child suffer because of it. What are you saying? I'm saying you need proper medical care. You need to eat well and rest and not stress yourself working 3 jobs. For the baby's sake, he pulled out his phone again. Mrs. Park, I need you to arrange something. Find one of our company properties. Something safe and comfortable. And get Dr. Martinez on the phone. Yes, I know it's late. I don't care. Rachel's head was spinning. Wait, I can't just move into your property. I have my mom to think about. She's sick. She needs me. Alexander paused. Your mother is sick. Cancer, stage 3. That's why I agreed to be a surrogate in the first place. For the money. To pay for her treatment. Rachel felt tears coming again. She was so tired of crying. The lawyer was supposed to pay me in installments. I got 3 payments, enough for her first round of treatment. But she needs more, and now the money's gone, and I don't know what to do. Something changed in Alexander's face. Maybe he understood desperation now. Understood doing anything for someone you love. What hospital is your mother at? City General. But I can't afford the next round of treatment, so I don't know if they'll keep her. Alexander was already typing on his phone. What's your mother's name? Sofia Torres. But why? Because I'm going to make sure she gets the treatment she needs. Rachel stood up so fast the chair rolled back. No, I'm not taking money from you. I'm not some charity case you get to fix because you feel guilty about your wife. Sit down, Alexander said firmly. When Rachel didn't move, his voice softened. Please, sit down. Rachel sat. Listen to me, Alexander said. You're carrying my child. My and Isabel's child. The only piece of her I have left. Do you understand what that means? You're not a charity case. You're the mother of my baby. And if something happens to you because you're stressed or working too hard or can't afford to eat properly, that affects my child. So this isn't about charity. This is about protecting what's mine. The word stung a little, the way he said mine, but Rachel understood what he meant. This was business to him. Protection of an asset. It shouldn't hurt, but it did, just a little. The DNA test, Rachel said. You said we could do a test to prove it's your baby. When can we do that? Tomorrow. David is arranging it tonight. Alexander looked at her carefully. Where are you staying tonight? Home. That neighborhood isn't safe. It's where I live. Not anymore. Alexander stood up. Mrs. Park has arranged a hotel room for you. A good one. With room service. You'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow we'll do the DNA test. Once it confirms what we already know, we'll make permanent arrangements. I don't need— Yes, you do. And so does my baby. Alexander walked to the door and opened it. Mrs. Park was waiting outside like she'd known she'd be needed. Mrs. Park will take you to the hotel. She'll make sure you have everything you need. Tomorrow morning a car will pick you up for the medical appointments. Rachel wanted to argue more, but she was so exhausted. The thought of a clean hotel room and actual food sounded like heaven. She stood up slowly. "Thank you," she said quietly. Alexander nodded. As she walked to the door, he spoke again. "Rachel." She turned back. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this mess. I'm sorry my wife put you in this position, but I promise you, I'll make sure you and the baby are taken care of. That's not charity. That's me keeping my wife's promise because she can't anymore." Rachel nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she followed Mrs. Park to the elevator, she touched her stomach gently. Everything was changing so fast. Yesterday, she'd been alone and scared. Today, she had a billionaire promising to take care of her. She didn't know if she could trust it, if it would last. But for tonight, she was going to sleep in a comfortable bed and not worry about where her next meal was coming from. Tomorrow would bring its own problems. Tonight, for the first time in months, she could just breathe. The DNA test results came back 3 days later. Rachel sat in Alexander's office again, this time in clothes Mrs. Park had insisted on buying for her. She'd argued about that too, but Mrs. Park had simply said that pregnant women need comfortable clothes and left 3 shopping bags at her hotel room door. Rachel had never owned anything so soft. David, the lawyer, opened a folder and slid it across the desk. "The test confirms it. The baby is biologically yours and Mrs. Chen's, created from your stored embryo. Ms. Torres has been telling the truth." Alexander closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them, Rachel saw something she hadn't seen before. Not grief this time. Hope mixed with fear. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." Over the next week, things moved faster than Rachel could process. Alexander arranged for her mother to transfer to Metropolitan Hospital, one of the best cancer centers in the country. When Rachel protested about the cost, he'd simply said, "My child deserves a grandmother." That had shut her up quick, though she'd cried about it later in her hotel room. He'd also found her a small house on his property. Not his main house, he'd explained. A guest house that was separate, private. Rachel could have her own space, but be close enough for the doctors he was hiring to check on her regularly. She'd driven out to see it with Mrs. Park, and her mouth had fallen open. It was bigger than any place she'd ever lived, with a real kitchen and a bathroom that sparkled and windows that looked out at gardens. "I can't live here," Rachel had said. "Why not?" Mrs. Park had asked, genuinely confused. "Because it's too much. Because I'm just the surrogate. Because when this is over and I have the baby, I'll have to leave. And I'll remember what it was like to live somewhere nice. And going back to my real life will be even harder." Mrs. Park had put her hand on Rachel's arm. "Maybe you're not thinking about this the right way. Maybe this doesn't have to be temporary." But Rachel knew better. This was temporary, all of it. The nice clothes, the comfortable bed, the house with a garden. Alexander was being kind because of the baby, because of his dead wife's wishes. Once the baby was born, she'd sign the papers giving him full custody, take whatever money was left from the original agreement, and disappear from his life. That's how it had to be. Still, she moved in. What choice did she have? Her apartment lease was up, and she couldn't afford to renew it anyway. Her mom was settled at the hospital, getting treatment that was actually working. Rachel visited her every day, and seeing her mom's face with some color back in it made everything worth it. Alexander started coming by the guest house. Not every day, but often. At first, it was awkward. He'd knock on the door and ask if she needed anything. Rachel would say no, he'd nod and leave. But slowly, the visits got longer. He'd ask about the pregnancy, if she was feeling okay, if the morning sickness was better. Rachel learned he was genuinely curious, almost hungry for information. One evening, he showed up with a stack of books. "I've been reading about pregnancy," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "These are supposed to be good. I thought you might want them." Rachel took the books, surprised. "You're reading pregnancy books?" "I don't know anything about this stuff. My wife handled all the medical things when we were trying before. I just showed up where she told me to." He paused. "I should probably know what's happening. With the baby." Something in Rachel's chest softened a little. She invited him in for tea, and they ended up talking for 2 hours. He asked about her pregnancy symptoms, and she told him about the weird food cravings and how her feet were already starting to swell. He told her about finding Isabel's journals, about discovering she'd planned all of this. "She wrote about you," Alexander said quietly. "Well, not you specifically, but about choosing a surrogate. She said she wanted someone kind, someone who understood what it meant to struggle, someone who would treat the baby like it mattered, not just a job." He looked at Rachel. She would have liked you. Rachel didn't know what to say to that. How do you respond to being approved by a dead woman? The visits became regular. Alexander would come by after work, sometimes bringing dinner from expensive restaurants downtown. Rachel would make tea, and they'd sit in her little kitchen talking. She learned that he was lonelier than she'd thought, that his big empty house felt like a museum to his dead wife, that he threw himself into work because it was easier than going home to silence. Don't you have friends? Rachel asked one night. Business associates. People who want things from me. It's not the same, he stirred his tea. Isabel was my best friend. We grew up together. Our parents were friends. We understood each other. That sounds nice, Rachel said. It was. Alexander looked at her. What about you? Where are your friends? Rachel laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Poor people don't have time for friends. I was too busy working to have a social life. Besides, when you grow up the way I did, you learn not to trust people too easily. Everyone wants something. I get that, Alexander said quietly. And somehow, in that moment, Rachel believed he did. Then his mother came to town. Victoria Chen arrived from Singapore like a storm, all designer clothes and cold disapproval. She showed up at the guest house unannounced, walking in like she owned the place. Which technically she kind of did. So you're the surrogate, Victoria said, looking Rachel up and down like she was examining a used car. Yes, ma'am. Rachel stood up straighter, refusing to be intimidated even though her heart was pounding. How convenient for you, getting pregnant by a billionaire's dead wife. Quite the meal ticket. Mom. Alexander had followed his mother in, his face tight with anger. That's enough, is it? Alexander, you can't be this naive. This girl shows up claiming to carry your child and you just move her onto your property? Give her access to your money? Pay for her mother's medical care? Can't you see what she's doing? Rachel's face burned. I'm not doing anything except trying to survive. I didn't ask for any of this. Your daughter-in-law hired me and I held up my end of the deal. If you think I'm trying to trap your son or something, you're wrong. The second this baby is born, I'm gone. You say that now, Victoria said coldly, but I've seen your type before. Poor girl, sad story. Hook's a rich man with a baby. I won't let you destroy my son's life. Your son's life is already destroyed. Rachel shot back, surprised by her own anger. His wife died. He's grieving. And instead of supporting him, you show up here accusing me of being some kind of con artist. I don't want your son. I don't want this life. I just want to have this baby safely and make sure my mom survives cancer. That's it. The room went silent. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Alexander looked torn between defending Rachel and respecting his mother. Finally, Victoria spoke. Fine. Let's make this simple. She pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my lawyer's number. I'm having him draw up a contract. You'll receive a very generous payment, enough to set you up for life. In exchange, you'll give birth to the baby, sign away all parental rights, agree to never contact Alexander or the child again, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Everyone wins. Rachel looked at the card, then at Alexander. His face had gone pale. Mom, you can't just, I can and I am. This is for your protection, Alexander. And for the babies. Children need stability, not some temporary arrangement with a woman who'll disappear back to her old life eventually anyway. Victoria turned back to Rachel. Think about it, dear. You'd never have to worry about money again. Your mother would have the best care. You'd be free. All you have to do is walk away. After Victoria left, Alexander stayed behind. I'm sorry, he said. She had no right to do that. She's your mother. She's protecting you. Rachel sat down, feeling exhausted. And maybe she has a point. What? About me leaving. About this being temporary. She's right, Alexander. I don't belong in your world. Once the baby comes, it would be better for everyone if I just went back to my life. Is that what you want? Alexander's voice was strange, urgent. Rachel looked at him, really looked at him. Somewhere over these past weeks, he'd stopped being just the billionaire CEO who scared her. He'd become someone she actually cared about. Someone whose smile made her day better. Someone she looked forward to seeing every evening, and that terrified her. What I want doesn't matter, she said quietly. This was always temporary. We both knew that. Alexander stood up abruptly. Maybe I don't want it to be temporary anymore. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. What are you saying? I don't know, Alexander admitted. I just know that these past few weeks coming here talking to you, it's the first time since Isabel died that I've felt like maybe I could be okay again. And I don't want that to end. Rachel touched her stomach, feeling the small flutter of movement inside. Your mother thinks I'm using you. My mother doesn't know you like I do. You barely know me. Then let me. Alexander moved closer. Don't sign that contract. Don't walk away. Stay, help me raise this baby. Not as the surrogate, but as, I don't know, as someone who matters. Because you do matter, Rachel, more than you think. Rachel wanted to say yes so badly it hurt, but fear held her back. Fear that this was gratitude, not genuine feeling. Fear that she'd get used to this life and then lose it. Fear that she was setting herself up for the biggest heartbreak of her life. Rachel was 7 months pregnant when everything fell apart. She'd been feeling off all day, dizzy and tired in a way that felt wrong. She'd driven herself to the hospital to visit her mom like she did every afternoon. They were sitting together, her mom knitting tiny baby socks when the world started spinning. Rachel? Her mom's voice sounded far away. Rachel, honey, you don't look good. Rachel tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't work. The room tilted sideways. She heard her mom screaming for help, felt hands catching her as she fell. Then nothing. She woke up to beeping machines and bright lights. A doctor was checking her blood pressure, his face serious. Ms. Torres, you're awake. Good. You gave us quite a scare. The baby, Rachel said immediately, her hand going to her stomach. The baby's okay for now, but you have severe preeclampsia. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. We need to monitor you very closely. Rachel's mom was crying in the corner. A nurse was trying to calm her down. Everything felt like a nightmare. What does that mean? Rachel asked, though part of her didn't want to know. It means you and the baby are both at risk. We're doing everything we can to stabilize you, but if things don't improve, we may need to deliver early. I'm only 7 months. I know, but sometimes the safest thing is to deliver the baby rather than risk both of you. The doctor squeezed her hand. We're not there yet. Let's take this 1 hour at a time. They called Alexander. Rachel didn't even know who made the call, but suddenly he was there. She'd never seen him like this before. His suit was rumpled like he'd been sleeping in it. His eyes were wild with fear. He'd been in a board meeting, apparently, an important one about his future as CEO. He'd walked out the second he got the call. Don't die, he said when he got to her bedside. No hello, no asking how she was. Just don't die. I'm not planning on it, Rachel tried to joke, but her voice came out weak. I'm serious, Rachel. You don't get to die. Neither of you. His hand gripped hers so tight it almost hurt. Promise me. I promise, she whispered. For 3 days, Alexander never left. The nurses brought him coffee and tried to make him go home, but he refused. He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, watching the monitors like if he stared at them hard enough he could will the numbers to improve. Rachel drifted in and out of consciousness, pumped full of medications to keep her blood pressure down and the baby safe. In her clearer moments, she'd find him asleep in the chair beside her, his head on the edge of her bed, still holding her hand. Once she woke to find him talking quietly and realized he was talking to the baby, his hand on her stomach. You need to hang on in there, little one. Your mom's fighting hard for you. We both need you to be strong a little longer. Rachel closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. When had this stopped being about duty and contracts? When had he started calling her mom instead of the surrogate? On the 4th day, Rachel woke up feeling strange, wrong. She pressed the call button, and within seconds, nurses flooded the room. The machines were screaming. Alexander was pushed out of the way, though he fought to stay. The last thing Rachel saw before they rushed her away was his face, absolutely terrified. The baby came early at 7 months, through an emergency surgery. Rachel was barely conscious for it. She heard crying, tiny and fierce, and someone saying, "It's a girl." Then everything went black again. When she woke up hours later, Alexander was there. His eyes were red like he'd been crying. She's alive, he said immediately. You got the baby. She's in the NICU, but she's alive. 3 pounds, 4 ounces. So tiny, Rachel. So incredibly tiny. Can I see her? Rachel's voice was hoarse from the breathing tube they'd had down her throat. Soon. The doctors want to make sure you're stable first. He moved closer. Rachel, you almost died. Your heart stopped on the table. They had to bring you back. Rachel processed this information slowly. She died. Actually died. But I'm okay now? You're okay now. His voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. Both of you. I sat in that waiting room and I realized that if you died, I'd have a daughter I'd never met and I'd lose the woman I... He stopped abruptly. The woman you what? Rachel asked quietly. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. The woman I love. I love you, Rachel. I know the timing is terrible. I know you just had surgery and almost died, and this is probably the last thing you want to hear. But I've been sitting here for hours thinking about what I would regret if I never got to tell you. And the biggest regret would be not saying this. I love you. Not because you're carrying my baby. Not because I'm grateful. I love you because you make me laugh. Because you call me out when I'm being difficult. Because you're strong and stubborn and you don't take my money or my name or any of it for granted. I love you and I almost never got to tell you that. Rachel started crying. I almost died without telling you I love you too. Alexander leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle like she might break. You love me? I've been so scared to admit it. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that I shouldn't get attached, but I failed completely. I'm so attached, Alexander. To you, to this life, to the baby, and it terrifies me. Why? Because what if it's not real? What if you're just confused because of everything that's happened? What if once things settle down you realize I'm just the girl who carried your baby and you don't actually want me in your life? Rachel. Alexander sat on the edge of her bed carefully, mindful of all her tubes and wires. I've never been more sure of anything. Yes, this started because of the baby, but it's not about that anymore. It's about you, about us, about the fact that when I thought I might lose you, my whole world stopped. They sat there together holding hands, both of them exhausted and emotional and overwhelmed. A nurse came in to check Rachel's vitals and smiled at them. You two look like you've been through a war. Feels like it, Alexander said. Well, someone wants to meet her mama, the nurse said. We can bring the baby in for a quick visit if you're up for it. Rachel nodded eagerly, trying to sit up straighter despite the pain. They wheeled in an incubator with the tiniest human Rachel had ever seen inside. So small, covered in wires and tubes, but perfect. Absolutely perfect. She has your nose, Rachel said to Alexander. She has your chin, he replied. Can I hold her? Rachel asked the nurse. Not quite yet. She needs to stay in the incubator for now, but you can touch her through the portholes. Rachel reached in and gently touched her daughter's tiny hand. Instantly, those miniature fingers wrapped around Rachel's finger and held tight. Rachel started sobbing. She's holding my hand. She knows her mama, the nurse said softly. Alexander reached in too, touching the baby's other hand. She's so small. Is she going to be okay? She's a fighter, just like her parents, I'd say. The nurse checked the monitors. She'll need to stay in the NICU for a while, probably a month or more. But her vitals are strong. We're cautiously optimistic. After the nurse wheeled the baby back to the NICU, Rachel and Alexander sat in silence for a while. Finally, Rachel spoke. Your mother's going to hate this. Us, I mean. My mother can learn to deal with it. Alexander's voice was firm. I'm not letting you go, Rachel. I'm not letting either of you go. What about that contract she wanted me to sign? Burn it, I never wanted you to sign it in the first place. He paused. I want you to stay. Not as the surrogate. Not as some temporary arrangement. As my partner. As the mother of my daughter. As the woman I love. People will talk. They'll say I trapped you. That I got pregnant on purpose to get your money. Let them talk. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters, Rachel squeezed his hand. I'm scared. Me too, Alexander admitted. I'm terrified. Of being a father. Of screwing this up. Of not being enough for you or for her. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe and alone. Okay, Rachel said softly. Okay, I'll stay. We'll figure this out together. She smiled despite her exhaustion. All three of us. Alexander leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, he was smiling too. We need to name her. We can't keep calling her the baby. What about Isabel? Rachel suggested. After your wife. It feels right. Alexander's eyes filled with tears. She would have liked that. Isabel would have loved you, you know. She would have loved that our daughter has a mother who fights so hard for her. Tell me about her, Rachel asked. Really tell me. Not just the sad parts. The good parts too, so Alexander did. He told her stories about Isabel while Rachel recovered. About their childhood adventures. About how Isabel couldn't cook to save her life but tried anyway. About her terrible singing voice and how she'd sing anyway. about how she'd wanted nothing more than to be a mother, and slowly Rachel began to understand. Isabel hadn't just given Alexander a baby. She'd given him a second chance at love, at family, at happiness. She'd brought Rachel into his life, and somehow, through all the pain and fear and uncertainty, something beautiful had grown. "Thank you," Rachel whispered to Isabel, to the universe, to whatever had brought her to that glass building months ago. "Thank you for trusting me with them both." 6 weeks later, Rachel stood in the NICU at 2 in the morning, watching baby Isabel sleep in her arms. The tubes were mostly gone now. The wires had been removed one by one. Isabel had gained weight and learned to eat on her own. Tomorrow they were finally bringing her home. "You should be sleeping," Alexander said, appearing beside her with 2 coffees from the hospital cafeteria. He'd gotten into the habit of bringing her coffee during these late-night visits, even though she mostly just held the cup for warmth. Couldn't sleep. Too excited. Rachel shifted Isabel carefully, marveling at how much bigger she felt now compared to those first terrifying days. "Can you believe tomorrow she gets to leave this place?" "Honestly? No." Alexander touched Isabel's tiny foot gently. "Remember when the doctor said she might need to stay for 3 months? She proved them all wrong. She's stubborn. Wonder where she gets that from." Rachel smiled at him. "Definitely from you," Alexander said, but he was smiling too. Things had changed between them over the past weeks. The confession in the hospital room had shifted something fundamental. They weren't pretending anymore, weren't dancing around their feelings. Alexander would kiss her goodnight after their NICU visits. Rachel had moved some of her things into the main house, slowly making herself at home in spaces that used to intimidate her. They were building something real, something that terrified and thrilled Rachel in equal measure. But not everyone was happy about it. Victoria had returned to Singapore, but not before making her disapproval crystal clear. The media had caught wind of the story too. "Billionaire CEO's surrogate mystery," the headline screamed. The tabloids painted Rachel as everything from a gold digger to a home wrecker. Never mind that Isabel had died before Rachel even entered the picture. Alexander's board had called another meeting, concerned about the publicity affecting the company's image. "My lawyer called again," Rachel said quietly, rocking Isabel. "About signing the custody papers." Alexander tensed. And I told him I needed more time. That things had changed. Rachel looked at Alexander. "Your mother sent her lawyer too. That contract is still on the table. A lot of money, Alexander. More than I'd see in 10 lifetimes. Is that what you want? The money and to walk away? 6 months ago? Yes, absolutely, that was the plan. Get paid, give you the baby, disappear." Rachel kissed Isabel's forehead. "But that was before I held her. Before I spent 6 weeks terrified she might not make it. Before I fell in love with her. Before I fell in love with you." "Then don't sign anything," Alexander said firmly. "Stay, be her mother, be with me. Forget the contracts and the lawyers and my mother's opinions. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Rachel handed Isabel to him carefully, then walked to the window overlooking the city. "Because I'm still the poor girl from the bad neighborhood. Because your business associates look at me like I'm dirt on their expensive shoes. Because your mother is right about one thing. People will always wonder if I'm with you for your money. They'll never believe someone like me could be with someone like you for any other reason." Alexander settled Isabel against his chest, swaying slightly the way the nurses had taught them. "Rachel, look at me." When she turned, his expression was intense. "I don't care what people think. I never have. The only opinions that matter are ours, and Isabel's eventually when she's old enough to have one. Your business, though, the board, they're worried about the publicity. The board can worry all they want. I'm not giving up my family for a company, even one I built." Alexander's voice was steel. "If they try to force me out, I'll start over. Build something new. None of it matters without you two." Rachel felt tears building. "You'd really do that? Give up everything you've worked for?" "In a heartbeat." He moved closer, careful not to jostle Isabel. "You want to know what I realized sitting in that hospital waiting room, thinking I might lose you? That all of this, the money, the company, the reputation, it's all just stuff. It doesn't mean anything if I'm alone. Isabel taught me that. You taught me that. Your wife taught you that," Rachel said softly. Alexander nodded. "She did. And I think she'd be happy knowing that her last gift to me wasn't just a baby. It was a second chance at having a real family. At being happy again," he paused. I read the last entry in her journal last week. The one she wrote the day before the accident. What did it say? She wrote about you. About how she'd chosen you not just because of the medical compatibility, but because she'd read your application essay 3 times. The one where you wrote about wanting to become a nurse so you could help people the way the nurses helped your grandmother before she died. Isabel wrote that she could tell you were someone who understood what it meant to care for people. Someone who would love a child not because you had to, but because that's who you are. Alexander's voice cracked. She wrote that she hoped if something ever happened to her, that I'd let you be part of the baby's life. That you deserve that chance. Rachel couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She wrote that. She saw something in you that even I didn't see at first. She knew. Alexander shifted Isabel to one arm and reached for Rachel with the other, pulling her close. So yes, stay. Not because of contracts or obligations. Stay because we're a family. The 3 of us. Stay because Isabel needs her mother. Stay because I need you. I need you too, Rachel whispered against his chest. Both of you. So much it scares me. Then we'll be scared together. They stood there in the quiet NICU, the 3 of them together, and Rachel felt something settle in her chest. Peace maybe, or hope, or just the simple certainty that this was where she belonged. The next day they brought Isabel home. Rachel's mother was there waiting. Finally released from the hospital herself, her cancer in remission. She cried when she held her granddaughter for the first time outside a hospital room. Mrs. Park had organized everything, decorating the nursery with soft colors and filling it with more stuffed animals than one baby could ever need. The media camped outside the gates, but Alexander's security kept them at a distance. Inside, they were in their own world. Rachel learned to change diapers while Alexander read parenting books frantically. They took turns with the 2 a.m. feedings. They argued about the right temperature for the bath. They were a family messy and imperfect and real. 3 months later, Victoria came to visit. Rachel had been dreading it, expecting another lecture about knowing her place. Instead, Victoria walked in, took one look at Isabel, and her entire face softened. She has my grandmother's eyes, she said quietly. Would you like to hold her? Rachel offered, even though her stomach was in knots. Victoria took Isabel carefully, and something remarkable happened. The cold, disapproving woman melted away, replaced by a grandmother meeting her grandchild for the first time. Hello, little one, she murmured. You've caused quite a stir, haven't you? Over tea later, Victoria spoke directly to Rachel for the first time without hostility. I was wrong about you. Rachel almost dropped her cup. I'm sorry, what? I was wrong. I thought you were after my son's money. I thought this was some elaborate scheme. Victoria glanced at Alexander, who was giving Isabel a bottle across the room. But I've been watching. The way you look at him, the way you are with Isabel. That's not something you can fake. She paused. My son lost his wife. I thought he'd never recover from that. But you brought him back to life. You gave him not just a daughter but hope. I didn't do anything special, Rachel said. You loved him when he was broken. You loved his daughter when she was fighting for her life. You stayed when you could have taken the money and run. Victoria met Rachel's eyes. That's everything special. Does this mean you're okay with us? Rachel asked carefully. I'm learning to be. It's not what I pictured for my son. But watching him now, watching you together, I can see it's what he needs. What you both need. Victoria smiled slightly. Besides, Isabel deserves to have her mother, and you are her mother in every way that counts. 6 months after that, on a warm spring evening, Alexander took Rachel to the spot where Isabel had first been buried. It was a beautiful cemetery with old trees and peaceful quiet. They brought flowers, and Rachel helped Alexander place them on the grave. Thank you, Alexander said to the headstone, for everything. For our daughter. For bringing Rachel into my life. For knowing what I needed even when I didn't. He paused. I hope you can see us wherever you are. I hope you know we're okay. That we're happy. That your daughter is growing up loved and safe. Rachel added her own words. I promise I'll tell her about you. About how much you wanted her. About how you made sure she'd have the best chance at life, even though you couldn't be here. About how you gave all of us this gift. She touched her stomach where a new life was just beginning to grow. And I'll tell this one too. They'll both know about the woman who made our family possible. Alexander's eyes widened. You're pregnant? Rachel nodded, smiling through tears. Found out yesterday. I wanted to tell you here with Isabel watching. Our family keeps growing. He kissed her then, deep and loving and full of joy. When they pulled apart, Rachel looked at the headstone one more time. Thank you, she whispered, for trusting me with them, for giving me a family, for everything. As they walked back to the car where baby Isabel was sleeping in her car seat, Rachel thought about that scared girl who'd stood outside a glass building almost a year ago. She'd been so desperate, so broken, so sure she didn't belong in Alexander's world. But she'd been wrong. She belonged exactly where she was, with the people she loved, building a life she'd never imagined possible. The needy girl and the broken billionaire had found each other in the worst circumstances. And somehow, through grief and fear and unexpected love, they'd built something beautiful. They'd become a family. Not in the traditional way, not in the way anyone would have predicted, but real and strong and full of love. And Isabel, the woman who'd brought them together without ever meeting Rachel, had given them the greatest gift of all: each other.